Hey guys, good morning and welcome back to the channel. So if you've been following along, you know we just did our Christmas giveaway. I just gave away two real nice cherry and maple end grain cutting boards. And at the time I made those cutting boards, I was super busy and I didn't really have time to film it. And I decided I was gonna make one more for my own use, and I figured I'd take you along and show you how I do it. So I figured some of you guys might be interested in how an end grain cutting board is made. I'm sure a lot of you out there, if you're woodworkers, have made them before, but I'm gonna give you a kind of a quick tutorial here on how I do it. I actually have a maple cut off here from another project. I had this piece of walnut kicking around. It's 2 inches thick. You can tell it's not super nice. It's got some pith in it, some knots, but for cutting boards, it's gonna be fine because I'm just cutting strips and I don't need very much. So we're gonna see if we can turn this not so nice piece into something nice. So that is the one nice thing about cutting boards. You can use pretty much off-falls, stuff you can't really use for other projects because you're cutting into small strips. It's really flexible. So what is an end grain cutting board and how do we make them? Well, just so happens I have some leftover extra strips here from when I made the giveaway cutting boards. And I figured I'd use it here kind of as a visual guide for you guys. So I'm sure most people are familiar with regular cutting boards. You cut strips of wood along the grain, glue them together, you have yourself a cutting board. So that is how we start. To make an end grain cutting board, you're actually making a cutting board, cutting it apart, and re-gluing it is essentially what you're doing. So you can see what I did here. I took maple cherry, alternated them, glued them up like a traditional cutting board. And then I took it on the radial arm saw and I just sliced it. Now I wanted this to be 1¼ inch thick, so I sliced my slices accordingly. And then all you do is you roll them. And you then glue them back together. Now, if you're paying attention, you know in the giveaway cutting boards, it was like a checkerboard pattern. What I did, I actually made 2 of these. This one, obviously, I started with maple, ended with maple. The other one I rotated. It went cherry maple. And that way I could take sections from each and just alternate them, and that's how you get that checkerboard. You could, depending on the dimensions you're shooting for, you could do, you know, start with maple, end with cherry, and just flip-flop them. There's unlimited patterns you can do. And we'll see, I might not do a checkerboard on this one. I might do something different. We'll just see how it looks once I get the strips made. Maybe we'll get a little creative with it. So the sky's the limit. I mean, you can even, if you want to get so technical, you can even make letters and designs with these grids. You know, if you're using squares, you can do all kinds of really neat stuff. But essentially what we did, we just turned it up. So now we've got the end grain facing up, which for a cutting board is great because that end grain is really resilient. It's easier on knives. It really is, you know, kind of, I guess, a lot of people would say a superior cutting board. I've made plenty of regular cutting boards in my life. They work great. This is just kind of an elevated way to do it, I guess. So that's what we're gonna work on here, is ripping our strips, gluing them, and then obviously this is going to be a multi-day project because we're going to have 2 glue ups. The first one, and then obviously this glue up. And then I'll show you how I flatten everything and dress it up a little bit. So it's pretty simple. I won't get in the weeds here with dimensions and stuff like that. That you can figure out on your own. Obviously you got to do some math to figure out, you know, what finish dimension you want. What size you want your squares or rectangles, or, you know, they don't have to be perfectly square. I'm probably going to make these square, but you can do whatever you want for your design. Sky's the limit. So I'm going to get to ripping some strips and we'll get them glued up. right, guys, I'm over in the heated shop now, and I got my strips all prepped up, ready to glue. I wanted to show you real quick. When I was doing the giveaway cutting boards, I threw these scrap strips together just kind of as a test board that I could, you know, practice getting to the finished thickness, machine setups, router edge, stuff like that. It was just junk I had laying around, so I threw it together. But I just shot a little bit of clear coat on it quick to show you, and now of course it's wet, so you're going to get reflection. I just wanted to show you what was possible if you're careful with how you line it up. You kind of see how I organize the grain, that you get these kind of neat little details in the grain, I guess you'd say. So you can really do some neat stuff with these end grains. Unfortunately, this is kind of junk. It's not big enough to use as an actual cutting board, and I was just kind of using it as a test piece. But I just thought it'd be a neat thing to show you. You know, if you take your time and really lay it out nice, you can really do some neat art with these end grain cutting boards. So anyway, I got this set up. I was kind of playing with it a little bit. Instead of doing a checkerboard, I'm gonna do like a rally stripe type deal. I think it's gonna look pretty neat when it's done. We'll see. It's kind of for my personal use, so it can be whatever I want it to be, I guess. We'll see how it turns out. You never know 100% what you're getting until you're done, because obviously now once I glue this, we're going to cross cut this and turn them up. So I can see this end, but I don't know how the grain's going to develop throughout. So I have more here than what I need. So like obviously that's going to be no good, but we'll just cut around that. And if we need, you know, 2 or 3 strips on this side, we'll use them. So I'm gonna get this glued up, and then obviously we're gonna have to let it dry overnight, and we'll come back and pick it up from there. Well, I'm back. Another cold morning here. You can probably hear the shop heater running there. We actually heat this shop off an outdoor wood boiler. It heats this shop, my dad's house, and my office, so that works pretty well for us. But anyway, I just popped the clamps off of this. What you see here is essentially just your regular run-of-the-mill cutting board. So we're going to take this over, run it through the planer, clean it up, and then we'll cut our strips and flip them, bring it back over here, glue it back up again. So check it out. I took some time, finagled this a little bit, put it exactly how I wanted it. Like I was saying earlier, the neat thing about these end grains, you can really kind of work it and get a neat pattern. So you can see I kind of flip-flopped some pieces here and got these circular patterns going. So that's pretty neat. You could have just stacked it, you know, all the same way. These are actually the ones I cut out with the knots in. Remember I said I was just gonna cut them and skip them. So this is the size I'm looking for. This is going to be a really neat design. So now we get to glue it up again. So I'm just going to flip them, put some glue on, clamp them up, kind of the same thing we did before. The one thing I will say about this, you want to be more careful with this glue up, because you can't run this through the planer anymore. If you tried to run this end grain through the planer, you're going to have a really bad day. It's not going to work. Yeah, you just can't plane wood on end grain. So in the next step, I'm going to show you how I flatten it. But the key here is to try to keep this as flat and even as possible. It's going to make your next step just easier. So let me get this glued up, and we'll be back to finish it off. So we're back at it, one more day here. It's all out of the clamps, glued up, dried, ready to flatten. So I'm just taking a chisel here and working it, knocking off these glue nibs a little bit. I'll bring you in here and give you a closer look.
So basically what we're down to now, all we got to do is flatten it and dress up our edges a little bit. Also trim it. I'm going to trim it up a little bit, trim it square and everything. So there's two ways that I know of to flatten this. The first way, which may be more accessible to guys at the home shop because most people have a router, is to make up some kind of router jig, like a flattening sled, and just take a flattening bit and work it back and forth over the surface until you get everything nice and flat, and then sand it, hand sand it, or use an orbital sander to clean it up. What I'm gonna do, I have a big drum sander, so I'm just gonna run it through the drum sander. It's gonna make quick work of it. It's a convenience. A lot of guys probably don't have that, but if you do, it's probably the easiest way to do it. All right, she's looking smooth, trimmed up. So all that we got to do yet is do the edges, and I'm just going to do a 1/4 inch round over on this. Nothing fancy. You could get as fancy as you wanted to, but I'm just going to keep it basic. It's for my own use. Round over, and then I'm going to do a finish sand on it, and then we'll put some finish on. That sanding's a real thrill a minute, isn't it? I left most of that for behind the scenes. Nobody needs to watch me sand. I hate sanding. I probably should give you guys a quick disclaimer. You always should clamp your workpiece down before routering it, so you don't chase it around the workbench like you just saw me do. Also, you saw me running the router the wrong way. I like to climb cut the ends. A lot of times it kind of reduces some tear out, but I don't recommend it unless you're very comfortable with a router. It can get away from you. But with a small round over bit, I don't really worry about it. So it's one of those things, do as I say, not as I do. Sorry for any of you safety police out there. Anyway, it's all sanded up. I got her cleaned up. We're ready for finish. So I'm just using cutting board oil, which is actually just mineral oil. So this I happen to get at Lowe's. It's Howard cutting board oil, food grade mineral oil, enriched with vitamin E. So for what that's worth. You can also just get mineral oil at pharmacy. They actually sell it there. There's other coatings you can use, but for food grade, I've always been told mineral oil. It's always what I've used. It works pretty well. So the one thing I will say about end grain, don't make the mistake I made the first time I made an end grain cutting board. Make sure you put enough oil on. If you've made regular side grain cutting boards in the past, you know, a coating of oil, you wipe it on, wipe it off, you're pretty well done. Well, that's what I did the first time I made an end grain cutting board, and it was not nearly enough. It was kind of dry, and I went to use it, and long story short, it stained, it started to warp, it was a mess. So make sure you put enough oil on. So it's really kind of simple the way I do it. I have it up on stands here. I'm gonna flood it on real heavy and just let it drink it in. This end grain is like straws. It's gonna soak it in like a sponge. I guess sponge is probably a better analogy than straws. It's gonna soak it in like a sponge. You're gonna come back, you're gonna be like, oh my god, it drank up all that oil. You're gonna Well, I'm gonna flip it to the other side, same thing, and you just keep doing that basically until it won't drink anymore, and then you're done. So that's all there is to it. And then for maintenance, whenever you're using this, if it starts to look dry, just hit it with another coat of mineral oil. Wipe on, wipe off, you're good. So they're pretty hardy once they're seasoned, but you do have to get a lot of oil into them. That oil basically fills up the pores and doesn't let anything else get in there. It doesn't let water get in, because if you don't have oil in there, it's going to soak up water like a sponge. And we all know what happens when wood soaks up water. It expands, it cups, it does all kinds of bad things. So a lesson I learned the hard way with end grain cutting boards. So let's get some finish on here. This is the payoff moment. So just very liberally just throw it on there. Really can't overdo it. Brand new roll of paper towels. Gotta find the end. It's about the easiest finishing you'll ever do. I love oil finishes. So simple. Got everything coated. Don't worry about bubbles or anything. This isn't polyurethane. It's just going to drink that right in. That's it. All there is to it. Let that soak in. Look at that. Now, in full disclosure, I'm not perfect. And I'm sure my #1 critic, if you're married, you know who that is, we'll pick this out right away. I did make an oopsie. I got some oil on my finger. Did make an oopsie here. If you look closely, very closely, my lines are off here a little bit, about a 32nd of an inch. I don't love it. I was kind of upset when I ran it through the sander and saw that. I should have been a little bit more careful when I glued up, but if I was going to sell this, I don't know if I'd sell it to somebody like that, but for my own use, I'll accept it. But you can see it's already drinking in there. You see it's starting to suck it in, and that grain is really neat there. That way you kind of oriented that walnut to make little diamonds. So that's it. I'm just going to keep working on finishing this, and I'll probably about an hour or so I'll flip it over to the other side, keep flipping it back and forth until it stops drinking it in, and then it's ready to use. So take it home. So that's about all I got. I got to get this shop cleaned up. I got to start my next project in here. I figured while I'm in here I'll start on the next one. I got this beautiful walnut behind me. I'm going to make something out of that, and that's going to be another video for another day. So stick around. You'll see this coming up in the future, and thanks for watching. See you later.